I encounter managers all the time who, like, they basically don't want, like, they want a wall. They only want you for your tasks. They don't want any of the messiness of the human. I mean, I'm sure that you've had to have seen this in
Yeah.
organizations where,
Yeah.
it's well, I shouldn't have to hear this. Well, if they're bringing it to you, they're probably not bringing it to you just because they want you to know their life. They're probably bringing it to you because they're trying to communicate something that's relevant to the job. So yes, you
Yes.
are hearing about the problems that they're having at home, but like they're telling you that because they need something, but they're not really good at directly asking for something. And
Yeah.
I mean, everybody has to be able to do their job even with the stuff that's going on at home. But if we can find a way of looking at it more like, okay, this is a negotiation and they need something in order to be able to do their job better given their current circumstances, what is that thing? And they're basically giving you the why, the what's happening that is for why they need some sort of adaptation. And you can't just cut people off from that. They're whole people. And like the whole Puritan ethic of like this wall between personal and work, that allows managers who want to be very task focused to basically avoid all the messiness of being human beings, but you are managing human beings and you can't avoid the messiness of human beings.
Yeah. I agree with you about that messiness. And the thing is, if the wall is there, now that's transactional.
Right.
That's not the same kind of relationship. That's a one-off thing. And employees will behave transactionally. So it's like, well, what did you do for me today? As opposed to, yeah, I understand there's ups and downs, Cindy, and I'm here for you.
Hmm.
And maybe one way to deal with some of that messiness is they're assuming I'm supposed to fix it for them. And that's not the case. It may simply be having an ear and then offering where they may find solutions, or where they can maybe get the help that they need, not to provide it, but but the thing is, if somebody's having problems at home, it does carry over. People don't leave it in the parking lot or the elevator or coming up the stairs. It weighs on them because it's always present. And so it's not their job to fix it, but to be able to create a little safe state. The fact that they're even bringing that to somebody's attention, as to, well, I'm a little preoccupied with this, so, that report might be late or this or that. I mean, it explains why maybe certain deadlines could be missed. And it explains certain behaviors, may not excuse it, but the fact that they're sharing that, um, you know, gives the manager, the supervisor, an opportunity to help provide a fix.
Right. Extra support,
Yes.
extended deadline. It helps the coordination part of this whole thing.
Yes.
Because I mean, think about like the employee's standpoint. Like they know that they're not getting this done because whatever, they've had something happen at home.
Right.
If they don't tell you that and then they miss the deadline,
Right.
you're going to be super angry with them.
Right.
And so
But
they're
on the other hand, if you know that they're dealing with a child's cancer diagnosis, well, that's a whole nother story that, and hopefully the manager has some empathy to provide some grace. And that's just, one extreme example. Now, if
Mhm.
somebody's bringing you a headache every single day
Right.
and
If
they're
they're
all
using
major
it as an
problems,
excuse to not get work done, like there's still
right,
an element of work that needs to be done. I think the
right,
interesting thing that you triggered when you were talking about it, because that's exactly what I meant. That wall is the difference between transaction versus social contract.
absolutely.
Uh, but like what's so interesting to me in coaching people is that like these same people will then be upset because the employee didn't go the extra mile.
Yes.
Well, you had a transactional agreement. That was your
Right,
social contract was I do X, you give me Y. You're
right,
not getting Z.
right.
And so if you're a manager and you're getting upset with your employees because, well, they're not willing to go the extra mile for me, well, you aren't willing to go the extra mile for them.
Exactly. It's about give and take, and not always things being X equals X. And so um, being
Hmm.
able to have that dynamic, and that is what is about the relationship. That's that human messiness that you were talking about. And it doesn't mean it's a free for all. It doesn't mean that, I talk about fairness, that they get anything and everything they want. It's about what's reasonable under the circumstances, to be able to set healthy boundaries. And that's why the communication is so important. And that's part of human messiness, not just here are the specs, here's the delivery, call me when you're done.
I think you made me think of an interview. I don't remember who it was with. I was pretty young when Reagan was in office, but it was Ronald Reagan and Nancy, and they were
Mhm.
being interviewed. And I think the interviewer asked Nancy, "So is everything 50-50 in your relationship?" Because they had
Mhm.
what appeared to me to be a pretty solid relationship, those two.
Yeah.
Um, and her response was, "No, it's never 50-50. Sometimes I'm doing 100% and he's not doing any, but in other tasks, he's doing 100%, or he's doing 75% and then 50%. And then, like it, but it's that the overall picture balances out. It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean that, okay, I'm going to take out 50% of the dishes from the dishwasher."
Yeah, it's that chemistry, it's that ebb and flow, which is part of a good relationship. And you see that on sports teams
Hmm.
when players are behaving in an unselfish way. They're passing the ball, they're there, they're being supportive. They're not always taking the star role, but they can be counted on. And that's the kind of thing that enforces trust, that weaves a cultural cloth of more loyalty and engagement, and really unlocks the talent of the people that you have. That with the proper coaching. And that's really what
Hmm.
managers need to do, to get those strengths, to enhance those strengths, to support and supplement where the weaknesses are.
So now what can we do to try to create a system in organizations where we facilitate that?
Well, I think it's helpful um, to take some inventory of where the speed bumps are. It's not necessarily about reinventing thing. It's just like, let's just eliminate a speed bump, smooth over some speed bumps. And one of the things my research showed is those speed bumps tend to fall into 5 categories. One is approachability, which you talked about. It might be as simple as putting that pencil down. It might be as simple as telling somebody when a person walks through the door, say, hold my calls. Unless something is really urgent and time sensitive, so that the employee understands
They
I've
come
got their
first.
full attention. You know, so the approachability, recognition, is it given? Um, when you're in a meeting and Cindy says something and it's like, yeah, yeah, okay, but then Bill over here says the same thing, and my God, Bill is brilliant.
Oh, that is
Did you
such a
know that?
sign. That is such a sign.
Exactly. I mean, so the proper recognition, which ties closely to bias. Sometimes people don't realize the kind of bias they have. They may have a favorite on their team, and it always comes back to the same person. Well, guess what? Maybe that person, their workload management now becomes an issue because, yeah, they can always be counted on. And
Mhm.
everybody's saying, yeah, well, we'll just let Bill handle it. I'm
Or
done.
or the manager's just relying on them too much. I mean,
Yes.
I've had people who
Yeah.
had problems with that as well. Not only were the employees who weren't getting the opportunities of recognition upset
Yeah.
because they weren't getting developed, but the
Right.
person who was getting it was upset because they're like, "I am working harder than anybody."
Right. Is it always to me? They're sitting there twiddling their thumbs. They're surfing the internet, and I'm doing all this hard research. Yeah, there's all that type of thing. Conflict management. You mentioned earlier about you're going to step in it. Hiccups happen. How are we handling it? Are we pointing and doing the blame game, or are we really trying to resolve it and find ways to avoid having the same thing happen again? Because saying I'm sorry is just not enough. That's really an incomplete apology.
Mhm.
It's really about, I won't do it again. Or how can I avoid doing it again? It's about having that conversation, and that dialogue. And then the last thing is the workload management. Are we setting goals that are unrealistic? I had one example that I repeat because it's just so ridiculous. The um, purchasing department was told they had to have 10% cost savings every single year. And the thing
Oh,
is,
that's
purchasing,
so BS.
Well, it turned out that way. The thing is, when new products came up, and you've got the growth curve, it's kind of easy with the quantities getting bigger and bigger. This was in manufacturing. But at some point, it's going to level off, and then a 3.0 version comes out, and the 2.0 stuff, gets smaller and smaller orders. You can't keep getting 10% cost savings on those parts, and so people get frustrated because that's how their bonuses are calculated. It's like, well, that's an impossible goal. So sometimes management sets unrealistic goals in terms of a timetable. It's fine to be aggressive, but you got to be realistic, because if it's so out of reach, people are just going to be demoralized, saying, I'm being set up to fail. And nobody likes being set up to fail.
Yeah, I think the reality on that is I think there's a whole lot more subjectivity on what workload is than people realize. Like, I think everybody goes into it thinking, well, this is what I need to do. And like somebody else did this amount of workload, and so I should be able to do it. But there is just a ton of adaptation that happens in the moment. And, managers are kind of guessing what workload will work. And so they jump. So when employees feel like it's not fair, they jump immediately to, well, they're just trying to get something out of me, that they're just trying to cheat me out of my bonus, for instance. And maybe, I mean, there might be other evidence for that, but there's also just the possibility that, like, look, there needs to be a mechanism in place for people to be like, this is not doable. Or how are you judging me on this thing that I have no control over?
Well, and you just hit on a couple of really key points. What metrics are being used to evaluate? How objective, how subjective are they? How measurable are they? And even just having the safety, and the open door to be able to walk in and go, okay, you've given me all these deadlines. They overlap. There's not enough hours in the day. You tell me what's the priority.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are afraid to do that because of the relationship they have with their supervisor. So it comes down to communication. If you peel back all of these areas, so much of it comes down to communication, being able to demonstrate empathy, and how we do that, and being aware of how we present ourselves, how we project, what we say, how we say it. All those things, they matter.